The night of Sarah's graduation was supposed to be the culmination of years of hard work, the end of an era where she had sacrificed so much to become a doctor. But when the applause echoed in the auditorium, it quickly turned into a deafening silence. Her ex-boyfriend, Mark, stood up in front of everyone, his face twisted with bitterness, and made an unexpected and cruel remark that pierced her heart. He publicly humiliated her, accusing Sarah of being selfish, consumed by her ambition, and incapable of balancing a relationship with her career. His voice echoed through the room, and the words felt like daggers, each one sinking deeper into her chest. As the stunned audience watched, Sarah stood frozen, feeling like the ground beneath her feet had vanished. Mark's words were a sharp contrast to the years of effort she had put into becoming a doctor, and in that moment, it felt like all her sacrifices had been in vain. But there, amidst the sea of faces, there was one man who watched her quietly. A foreign businessman named Zachary. He saw something beyond the hurt in Sarah's eyes. A fire, a resilience. The scene that unfolded before him left a lasting impact. Zachary knew that there was more to Sarah than the humiliation she was facing. As the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, he approached her quietly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm but with an underlying intensity. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered if he had somehow seen the real her, beyond the broken woman standing before him. But in that brief silence, Zachary's words were the only thing that didn't sting. And in that instant, she knew her journey had just begun. Not as a victim of public humiliation, but as a woman with a chance for something bigger. Before the chaos of her graduation night, Sarah had lived a life defined by ambition and purpose. From the moment she entered medical school, she knew what she wanted: to heal, to make a difference in people's lives. Her days were consumed with studying, late nights at the hospital, and research that pushed the limits of her own endurance. She was proud of her dedication, even if it meant sacrificing other parts of her life. Relationships came and went, but none could compete with the gravity of her calling. Her apartment was modest, filled with books, medical journals, and pictures of her family. Her mother had always been proud of her, and her father, a former doctor himself, had been the one who pushed her to strive for greatness. They had always supported her, even when they didn't fully understand the sacrifices she made for her career. Her relationship with Mark had been different. In the beginning, it felt like they had found a balance, his laid-back personality complementing her intense drive. He didn't mind that she was busy, and she liked that he gave her the space she needed. But over time, the cracks began to show. As she moved closer to graduation, Mark started to feel neglected. His complaints became louder, his frustration growing as he accused her of putting her work above their relationship. But Sarah was determined. She loved him, but her dreams were non-negotiable. She had given everything to get to this point, and she couldn't let it slip away. Her life before that moment of humiliation had been one of quiet determination. She never thought it would be shattered so publicly, so painfully. The night of her graduation was meant to be the culmination of years of effort, but instead it became a defining moment of heartbreak. Mark's public outburst was a cruel twist of fate that no one saw coming. The tension had been building for months, but Sarah had hoped that somehow they would find a way to navigate the differences between them. She never imagined that he would choose this moment, her moment, to tear her down in front of everyone. The auditorium had been filled with the familiar faces of classmates, professors, and family. But as Mark stood up, all eyes shifted to him, and his voice rang out, loud and cutting. He accused Sarah of being consumed by her career, calling her cold, distant, and selfish. His words were harsh, venomous even, but it was the accusation that stung the most, that she had abandoned him, and by extension, their love. Sarah's heart raced, her face flushing with a mix of disbelief and shame. She felt the air leave her lungs, as if the weight of the room was pressing down on her. The audience fell silent, the words hanging heavy in the air. She wanted to shout, to defend herself, but all she could do was stand there, frozen. As Mark's voice echoed through the auditorium, she could feel the eyes of everyone on her, waiting for her to respond. But there was nothing she could say. The truth felt irrelevant in that moment. In a single, brutal moment, everything she had worked for was overshadowed by the weight of his words. The world felt like it had stopped spinning. In the midst of her pain, she looked across the room and saw Zachary. His gaze was steady, unwavering. He didn't offer her sympathy. Instead, it was something else, respect, admiration even. In a moment that should have been hers, he had seen through the facade of the event and recognized the real person standing before him. The consequences of that night were far-reaching. Sarah returned to her apartment in a haze, her mind reeling. She couldn't shake Mark's words. His accusations echoed in her mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The harshness of his public humiliation left her feeling small, insignificant, as though the years of effort she had poured into her education had all been for nothing. In the days that followed, Sarah withdrew from her friends and classmates. She couldn't bear to face them, knowing that they had witnessed the collapse of her relationship. The once familiar halls of the medical school felt like a foreign place, and the prospect of starting her medical career seemed distant and unreachable. She had always prided herself on her independence, but now, for the first time, she felt utterly alone. Her family called, concerned, but she didn't have the words to explain. How could she tell them that the man she had loved had torn her down in front of everyone? How could she explain the shame that weighed heavily on her chest? Every conversation felt like a reminder of her failure. The few people who reached out to her, friends, mentors, tried to offer comfort, but it felt hollow. No one truly understood the depth of her humiliation. No one could see past the surface of her outward composure. Sarah wasn't sure she even wanted them to. Yet amidst the silence and pain, one thing kept her going. Zachary's quiet support had been the one thing that hadn't been a part of the chaos. It was a simple act, a question, a glance, but it had planted a seed of possibility in her mind. Sarah knew that she couldn't let this moment define her. She couldn't allow Mark's cruelty to determine the trajectory of her life. Slowly, she began to pick up the pieces, not for him, but for herself. Her drive to become a doctor had always come from within, and though the pain of that night was still raw, she realized that her future was not tied to someone else's opinion. Her decision came quietly. She would accept Zachary's offer, not as a way to escape the pain, but as a chance to redefine her life. She wasn't the broken woman Mark had painted her to be. She was strong. She had proven it time and time again in her studies, in her sacrifices. The journey wasn't going to be easy. There would be days when the humiliation would feel unbearable, but Sarah knew that it was time to take control. She would rebuild piece by piece. And as she stepped forward into the unknown, she carried with her the strength she had always had, the strength to rise from the ashes of her past. The months after Sarah's graduation were filled with change. She threw herself into her medical career, moving to a new city for a prestigious position at a renowned hospital. Every day was a new challenge, but she was determined to prove to herself and the world that she was more than the humiliation of that night. She made new friends, built a professional reputation, and learned to balance her demanding job with the quiet moments of self-reflection that helped her heal. Slowly, the wounds from her past began to fade, replaced by the satisfaction of seeing her patients recover, the joy of making a difference. Sarah no longer thought of Mark daily. His cruel words had lost their power. One night she sat in her apartment, looking out over the city skyline, a glass of wine in her hand. She realized that she hadn't thought of him in weeks. It wasn't that she had forgotten the pain. She had simply chosen to move forward. But there were still moments of loneliness, quiet evenings when she longed for companionship, for someone to share the small victories and defeats that came with her life. She had come so far, but there were parts of her heart that still carried the weight of the past. It wasn't until she ran into Zachary again, months later at a medical conference, that she realized how much she had changed. He had been there for her in a moment of crisis, but now she saw him as someone who had witnessed her transformation. Their conversation was brief, but meaningful. Zachary told her he had been impressed by the way she had handled everything, how she had grown. He didn't offer any advice, but his words carried the weight of understanding. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt truly seen. Years passed, and Sarah had built a life that was no longer defined by her past. Her career as a doctor flourished, and she had found a sense of peace within herself. Yet, just as she was beginning to feel settled, the past came crashing back in a way she hadn't expected. It was during a medical conference, one that Sarah had organized herself, that he seemed to be waiting for the right moment, unsure of how to approach the woman he had once known. Finally, during a break in the conference, their paths crossed. "Sarah," he said, his voice hesitant, "I need to apologize. I owe you more than you could ever know." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their history. Sarah felt a wave of emotion rise within her, anger, sorrow, and perhaps something else. She had spent so many years trying to move on, to not let his betrayal define her, but hearing him speak those words brought the floodgates of the past wide open. "You humiliated me in front of everyone," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "You took the one moment that was supposed to be mine and turned it into something shameful." Mark nodded, his face filled with regret. "I know. I was wrong. I was angry, and I said things I didn't mean. But seeing you here, seeing what you've become, I can't help but feel like I missed out on something incredible." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall. "You missed the person I was. You missed the strength it took for me to get here. But what you don't get, Mark, is that I'm not the same person anymore. I'm not defined by what you did to me." Mark's apology hung in the air, but Sarah didn't need it. She had already forgiven herself. As she walked away from him, she felt the final weight of the past lifting. There would be no more haunting shadows of the past. Sarah was free, truly free for the first time. Sarah stood at the edge of the conference hall, looking out over the bustling city skyline. The noise from the event behind her was a distant hum as her thoughts swirled in a quiet space of reflection. She had just confronted her past, something she never thought she'd be able to do. In the past, she had feared this moment, dreading that it might reopen wounds she had worked so hard to heal. But now, as she stood there, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The truth was, Sarah had learned that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It was about freeing yourself. She had spent so many years holding on to the pain Mark had caused, but in that final moment of confrontation, she realized that forgiveness was a gift she gave herself. It wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about accepting that the past didn't define her. Life, Sarah now understood, was not about waiting for the perfect moment to heal or the right person to fix you. It was about taking the power back, even in the most painful of circumstances. It was about moving forward with strength, even when the world tried to knock you down. As she walked away from the past, a feeling of hope rose within her. Sarah knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and pain, but she had already proven to herself that she could rise above them. And in that knowing, she found a new kind of freedom. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones you fight within yourself, and when you win those battles, you truly set yourself free. If you enjoyed Sarah's story and how she overcame the challenges in her life, don't forget to hit that like button below. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. How would you have handled the situation if you were Sarah? Would you have confronted the past or walked away? And make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful story like this one.